After he finished.
Okay,
we
Lane,
start
go
the
ahead.
video before I start.
Okay.
Do you want me to move over?
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. We're glad to have you here. My name is Lynn.
Slow down.
Okay. My name is Lynn Towery. We're very happy that you all have decided to join us for our newest trafficking presentation. Stephanie Baldwin has been a friend for close to 30 years, or at least 30 years. And her daughter Mackenzie, as you all will learn soon, had the situation come up, and we're going to learn tonight exactly how they took care of making sure that she did not see or points unknown. So, without more, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Raising children in the digital age, as you're about to find out, can be frightening.
A family in Plano knows the dangers all too well. They almost lost their teenage daughter forever, and Shannon Murray is here with this really troubling story.
It is troubling, and it's something all parents and just anyone in general should pay attention to, because you might think you're being careful online, but these kinds of things can happen to good people, so you never know. Mackenzie Baldwin had plans to leave the country and marry a stranger she met online. It really sounds like a movie plot, but it's real life for this Plano family, now sharing their story in hopes it won't happen to someone else.
I had my passport, I had everything I needed just to leave, and I was 18, of course.
Just 18 and in love, Mackenzie Baldwin had it all figured out.
I planned to go to Kosovo, and I was going to board a plane and go and marry him once I got there.
As she prepared to graduate from Plano West Senior High School, Mackenzie's parents saw a change in their once social, outgoing daughter.
We had been noticing that Mackenzie was pulling away from us, and she had separated from her friends.
We literally did everything we could do. We looked at phone records, we, just searched and searched and searched to try to find out what was at the cause of it.
What they didn't realize, Mackenzie planned to leave everything she knew behind. Friends, family, and her Christian faith. She converted to Islam, all for a man named Adam, who she met in the online chat room Omegle. Over the course of 14 months, they communicated online and through the mail. They became engaged and made plans to be together.
I kind of think of it as brainwashing. That's what it feels like.
When friends learned of her plan to leave the country, they stepped in and told Mackenzie's parents.
We've been treating this that she was a rebellious teenager, and then we realized that she was a victim and she was being manipulated, and she was in a lot of danger.
Realizing the situation was fragile, they chose not to go to Mackenzie right away and instead went to the FBI for help.
And we just couldn't afford to make a mistake. We had one chance to try to save her.
They had an intervention the last day of my senior year, 3 days before I was supposed to leave.
That's when Mackenzie learned how dangerous the situation really was.
That part of the country is second in the world for human sex trafficking, so that is the most likely scenario.
In their new book, Almost Gone, Mackenzie and her dad each share their story from their perspective.
Everything was actually still going on when this photo was taken.
Hoping their family's nightmare will save someone else.
We always said, even if it helps just one person, it would be worth it, and it's been so worth it.
Wow. Now, I just met you, and you know the most terrible thing that's ever happened to our family. I really appreciate the opportunity to come speak with y'all tonight. I don't often get to speak to just parents. We usually have a lot of the teens in the room, which I really like speaking to teens because I go over with them the tactics in detail. But we're going to talk about more of a parental approach tonight. Would it surprise you if I told you that the Center for Exploited and Missing Children, they track cyber type tips that come in? And last year they had 29 million that came in on their lines. Now that's not just this type of cyber crimes, but 29 million. And that's a 35% increase over the year before. One of the reasons I think that increase has happened is because the computer that used to sit in our living rooms now sits in our pockets. And not just my pocket, but every adult that's in my house, every student that's in my house, many of our children carry these around as well. There are hundreds of chat sites, game sites, dating sites, that's purpose is to connect you with somebody you don't know. Omegle was mentioned in the video. That's the one Mackenzie used. Any of y'all heard of Omegle? When I speak to teens, still to this day, this was from 2017. To this day, when I ask, have y'all heard of Omegle, the hands go up. Now, back when Mackenzie was on it, and I logged in, 300,000 people on it at that point in time. Now you log on, it's like 8 to 10, so it's lost a lot of popularity, but there's a lot of other ones that are up there that do the exact same things. In fact, the tagline to Omegle is talk to strangers. Okay? Now, of course, not everybody that's on these websites or chat rooms or anything are predators by any means, but that's the trick. How do you know? How do you know who you're really, really talking to? Because that electronic door to the internet is a wonderful thing, but along with that comes some significant risk. And if you're connected to the internet in any form, it could be a gaming console, an iPad, a cell phone, a computer, anything like that, you are at risk for being contacted by a predator. And in today's time, that predator can be absolutely anywhere in the world. John and I thought that we had that door locked down. And I'll tell you a little bit in a minute the things that we had done, but we thought we had that lock pretty secure and that our family was safe. Only to find out the security measures we had taken were not enough. Mackenzie knew more than we did. And she unknowingly, innocently, but unknowingly led a predator into her life and into the life of our family. And started this whole story. Now, if you're thinking right out of the gate, great story, but I'm glad she's okay, but my kid or my student would never fall for that. Let me tell you a little bit about Mackenzie, because I would have sat in your chair and said the same thing. Mackenzie's very outgoing, very stubborn, very social. She dated a lot through high school, very adventuresome. Did I say stubborn? That's the word. I need an amen to that.
Yeah, amen. I'll give you that one.
Yeah, she had a group of probably 10, 12 kids that were in and out of my house all the time. She dated a lot. She went to all the homecoming dances and proms and all that kind of stuff. You know, it was not what I would have thought, the stereotypical student that would have fallen for something. I would have thought much more shy, much more reserved. Yes. But that's not like Mackenzie. Matter of fact, if I were to write what I thought was the stereotype, she wouldn't have checked any of those boxes. However, in that 14-month period that we dealt with this, everything about her changed. Her personality, her adventuresome nature, her approach to school, her grades tanked, her relationship with her dad and myself, her relationship with her brothers, all of her friends. What?
The way she dressed.
The way she dressed. Just her demeanor, her attitude, everything. I like to say it was as if somebody came into my house and picked up my happy-go-lucky, free-spirited daughter and replaced her with somebody that I didn't even recognize. And it happened so quickly that it was just, my head was spinning. Since then, John and I have often spent many hours, especially after it first broke, sitting down kind of saying, how did this happen? What did we do we shouldn't have done, or not done that we should have done, or how did we miss the boat in all of this? And I'll tell you that we looked back when we first started having children and thought, where's the parent book, right? You don't really get one of those. So what are we going to do? We were just going to this blind. And we look back, we were both reared in a town similar, I would equate it to like Tyler, Texas, over Louisiana. Both of our parents been married forever, solid home life. And we said, you know what our parents did for us seemed to work okay. We think we turned out okay. So we said, we're going to use that as a model. And we're going to raise our kids basically the same way our parents raised us. We did recognize that one difference in today's world of raising kids versus then was the whole technology, internet, cell phone, social media kind of thing. And so we did what we need to do. We went to the presentations at school. We went to the youth presentations and all, John researched stuff. And we put the parental control software on the computer. We had those rules like the computer stays downstairs in the common area. Don't take it up to your bedroom. We occasionally would do, get on the computer and review search histories. Occasionally I would grab their phones and go through text, the thousands of texts they would do a day and try to kind of scan through those. So we did what we thought was right. And we kind of said, with all these controls in place, that's probably good enough, and I think we did put a little bit too much reliance on the technology and those few checks that we did, and we didn't do as much education as we might should have done. I think there were 3 areas that we didn't give as much importance to, that our kids face today that we didn't have. First of all, social media. Now, I don't just mean that social media exists today for our students and it didn't when I was a kid. It's really more about the importance that social media plays in their lives. If I were to tell all of y'all right now ahead of time, look, after this meeting, we're going to get on a plane, we're going to Hawaii, we're going to lay on the beach, and do all this fun stuff, but you're not going to have internet connectivity. Most of the adults would say, well, bummer, but okay, let's go. Free trip to Hawaii, right? If your student wasn't here with you, what do you think they would say? Some of them would not even go. And some that went, over a matter of hours, and certainly if it went into days, the anxiety level would start to rise, as they would feel disconnected, not knowing what's going on with their friends, completely left out of the loop. And that anxiety level would begin to rise. And then we as parents would have a miserable time, right? Because our kids just can't be separated from that. Now, I'm not trying to say social media is a good thing or a bad thing, but we as parents need to recognize the importance it plays in our kids' lives. Okay? Secondly, cell phones. Again, not that they just exist today and they didn't when I was high schoolish. But when I was growing up, if I wanted to call my grandmother, who lived a couple of cities over, I had to make a certain kind of call. Who knows what that is?
Long distance.
Person collect.
What were you saying?
Person to person collect.
Okay, collect
And then
call,
you give the
yeah.
number of the payphone and they call back.
Right, so collect call or a long distance call. And a long distance call would show up very shortly at my parents' house on the bill, and it would have the phone number, how many minutes that conversation lasted, and then you were charged by the minute. So very quickly, if a phone number showed up on there that my parents didn't recognize, who did they come to? Me or my sister? Who are you talking to? There was accountability right out of the gate, as soon as that bill showed up. Now, in today's world, our kids can call anybody in the world, and it's basically no accountability. You have to really work to find out the numbers that are called from these cell phones. It's quite a feat to do that. They can call anybody in the world. There's no charges that come to your house. There's no report that gets to your house that tells you how long your child or your student was on that call. And then lastly, just sheer privacy. When I was a kid, we had a landline. If I wanted privacy, first of all, I had to have a cord all the way to another room. And if I could get into another room and shut the door, I was a lucky one, right? And then you only had so long before somebody was saying, I need to use the phone, get off the landline, right? It wasn't called a landline then, it was just the phone. Get off the phone. What happens today? These phones go with our kids in their pockets to work, to school, if they're babysitting, they stay on their nightstand at night for their alarms, they're on the side of the bathtub when they're taking showers, they're at friends' houses. I mean, they're with them literally 24/7. And so what that means is through this device, they can reach out to their social media at any point in time for all practical purposes, call anybody in the world with no accountability and do it in complete privacy for as long as they want to. When you think about it like that, the difference in how I was raised versus those are some big chunks that gave my parents some control that I didn't have over my kids. Or at least, now that I know that, I could put some better controls in place, but at the time, we kind of missed that a little bit. The latest statistics I saw showed that by the time our kids are 7 years old, 40% of them have access to the internet. By the time they're 10, 70%. That's like a third grader or fourth grader. 70% can have access. So what do you think it is by the time they're like 15, right? It's essentially everybody. There's essentially, even if you said, I'm not giving you any of those devices, they got friends, they got schools, they got public libraries, there's ways to get on that kind of thing. So how do these predators get to our youth? Because I'm sure you're like I was. When my kids were little bitty, you tell them, don't take candy from strangers, you're careful on Halloween, all those little things, don't do anything, don't talk to somebody you don't know. They get a little bit older where they're starting to walk to neighbors, friends' houses, things like that, and you say, make sure you don't go up to a car who's trying to get you to come up to the car. Somebody comes out and says they lost their puppy, you don't go help them find their puppy, all those kind of things. The vernacular has even changed even more as our kids have grown into young teenagers, And we literally tell them all those same things, but we also say, don't accept friend requests from people you don't know. Don't go into chat rooms and talk to people you don't know. Don't set up dating sites and things like that and act like you're older than you are. We tell them all those things. But do they hear us? Do they abide by it? I believe that our students don't connect the dots between what we as their parents and guardians and authorities, teachers, all that kind of stuff in our kids' lives. They don't connect the dots with what we are telling them and what they do every day on social media. It just doesn't connect because they're hidden behind the screen. And it's easy to think they don't know where I'm at. They don't know anything about me. If it gets creepy or gets odd or gets weird, I can just unfriend or turn it off or whatever. But I'm here to tell you, it's not so easy because they don't get creepy or odd day one. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, how they string you along, and then suddenly you're in this relationship and you feel very trapped. I like to tell students when I talk to them that they underestimate the risk that they take when they go into these sites, and they overestimate their ability to handle it. And that's a message I think we need to really drive home with our kids. You may think that you've got this under control, but there are too many examples where it's not. It's not panning out the way you think that it is. Why is manipulation and grooming so difficult to see? Sheer definition. That's what grooming and manipulation is. If it were easy to see, you wouldn't be manipulated, right? You would see it, you know it's coming. But they're so good at it that you don't even see it coming. I want to share with you a young woman, her name was Alicia. At the time she was 13 years old, grew up in a loving, stable home. She got online and created a relationship that lasted for 9 months with a man. At the end of that 9 months, she agreed to meet him in person. Of course, you can imagine what happened. She was kidnapped, held for, I believe, 4 days, terrorized, and saved by the FBI literally hours before she was to be killed. Here's how she describes, these are her words, and to me this is frightening. This is what she talks about manipulation or grooming. Now remember, she's 13. I got a screen name, I got online, and all of a sudden I didn't feel as shy. My online friend made me feel like the smartest, coolest, prettiest young woman. I know it sounds like red flag, red flag, red flag, but grooming feels good. It feels like friendship. That's scary. It's really scary. In the words of Mackenzie, at one point, she says, "It was never clear to me that he was manipulating me. He had the ability to convince me that everything he said was the truth, and what everyone else was telling me was wrong." Normally when I talk to students, I go through 4 or 5 or 6 tactics in pretty good detail. I want to go over 2 of them with you tonight as parents. These are 2 that I think I probably, and somewhere in the back of my mind, always wondered, how do they do this? Number 1 is how do they separate you from your family? And number 2 is how do they get you on that plane? Okay? All the other things are psychological, and you can kind of see how they work, there's, manipulation, stuff like that. But those 2, I always kind of wondered. And I always thought, well, was it a broken family anyway? Were they not close? Was this girl out there just looking for attention or what? But here's how it works. This is with Mackenzie. So separating her from family. It did not start where he just, now let me say that they were Skyping back and forth basically on Omegle, okay, or later on Facebook, but typing back and forth. Didn't use the audio for a while, later used the audio, but literally seeing each other. So this was not a picture of him. Okay, this was like being on a Zoom call with somebody. And one day he didn't just say, "Hey, back off from your parents," and she said, "Okay." It's not that black and white. What happens is one day he says, out of the blue, "Mackenzie, I don't think your parents really understand you." And she says, "Well, why would you say something like that? Of course they understand me. Don't say that." And he said, "Oh, okay, I'm not trying to offend you. Just okay." And then several days or weeks go by, and maybe she and I had an argument, or she and John had an argument about a movie she wanted to see that we thought was rated too high, or a girlfriend's house she wanted to go to, or a dance, or a curfew, or whatever it could be. And so she's mad. And so the next time she's talking to him, what's she doing? Complaining, venting to him. So what does he do? told you your parents didn't understand you. And in her moment of anger and frustration, she says, you know what, maybe you're right. And he says, I see this blooming, blossoming young woman that you're becoming, this mature beyond your years. He was about 5 years older than her. So I can see him saying, you know, I'm 5 years older than you, and I feel like you're equal with me. You're so mature. Your parents want you to stay a little girl. They don't want you to grow up. They're trying to keep you seeing PG movies. And so, and then in her, again, moment, she kind of says, well, you know what? Maybe that is right. And so that little wedge gets placed between, in her mind, between us and Mackenzie. And over the months, he just taps away at that. And that, you can imagine, that space gets further and further and further. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So how does he get him on the plane? It does not start with him saying, hop on a plane to Kosovo. And she's saying, okay. It started, and this is, I call this the breadcrumb trail. He first said, they've been talking for a few weeks, and he says, you know what, next summer, which was about a year away, I'm coming to America. And I'm going to spend several weeks or a month or so in America. So I'm going to come to Dallas. And if I come to Dallas, would you meet me at a coffee shop? And let's meet in person. And she says, I mean, I guess, if we're still talking a year from now, sure. Well, I'll meet you at Starbucks. And so they planned on that for a while and kind of talked about that for a while. Several months go by and their friendship kind of begins to grow. And after a while, he says, oh, Mackenzie, you know, maybe I didn't realize how big America was. I can't come all the way down to Dallas. I'm going to have to stay in the New York area when I get there. Can you come to New York? And at first she says, there is no way my parents will let me go to New York. Then she says, but it will be the summer after my senior year. Maybe if I got a group of girlfriends together, we could make that our senior trip. And, you know, I could meet you for coffee in New York. Yeah, could probably make that happen. So that morphs into, now she's willing to go to New York. A few more months go by, their friendship kind of probably by this time more in the romantic realm. And he says, dang, Mackenzie, I can't get to New York. I don't have the money. But I can get to Switzerland. And I know you, Mackenzie, are going to Switzerland next summer. Which she was. She had a friend that was an exchange student that stayed with my sister for a year. They became good friends, and we had agreed that Mackenzie could go to Switzerland and stay with Muriel and her parents for a week. She, of course, had told him that. So he says, how about we meet in Switzerland? It's a lot closer for me, a lot less expensive. I can get there easily, and we can, you know, meet there. So in her mind, she starts playing that out, saying, well, I understand it would be cheaper, and it's a lot less expensive for you, and I'm going to be there anyway, and I'll be safe because I'll be with Muriel's family, and yeah, you know, okay, I can make that work. So they start planning on it. A few more months go by, and just before this is all to happen, he says, guess what? I didn't save any money at all. I can't even get to Switzerland. If we're going to be together, you got to come to Kosovo. And at first she says, I'm not going to Kosovo. Then she looks around, and you'll hear from her in a moment. She doesn't have any of her friends anymore. She's pushed John and I so far away. We're like islands unto ourselves. She sees nothing here to keep her here. Finally, she says, okay, I'll come. That's how that works. That was over 14 months. Now, Mackenzie would tell you to this day that she never really realized when it flipped from him coming to her going to him. And remember, that flipped when it was so logical, right? It's so much closer, and you're coming here anyway, and why should I spend all that money? You know, and so he just walks her right down that path. That's a way for them to see just how invested you are in that relationship. How far will you go? And when they get you here, they see if they can get you there, you know? There was a young girl that we were talking to. She was 15. In a few months, she was turning 16. And she knew her parents were giving her a car for her 16th birthday. Her plan was to then run away and drive that car to be with the man she'd been talking to online. She's been talking to him for 5 years. Since she was like 10, early 11. These guys will stay with you. One of the things Mackenzie used to tell me all the time was, if it wasn't real, Mom, he wouldn't have spent that much time with me. Yeah, they do. Alicia's was 9 months. Mackenzie's is 14. this other girl's was 5 years. John and I talked to parents all over the country and some throughout the world, and a year or two is not uncommon at all for this to be going on. Also during this time, Mackenzie saw what she wanted to see. So she was kind of a willing participant to be manipulated, if you want to use that word, because she was enamored by him. Let me read you Mackenzie's view. I found myself thinking of him throughout the day, and often I wanted to talk to him more than anyone else, even more than spending time with my family or friends. Adam and I had become so connected that I felt like our friendship wasn't something I could easily back out of. That's that trapped feeling. And she and I talked a lot about that later, but she felt very trapped. In my mind, the only person who understood me was Adam. I became convinced that I was seeing the world for myself instead of allowing my parents to point the way. When we got that call from 3 parents within 48 hours of each other, whose 3 daughters had gone to them and said, I don't know the whole story, but I know this is what Mackenzie's planning. Those 3 parents called us. Devastated is the best word I can use for that feeling, but I really wish there was a better word for that flood of feeling, from desperation to betrayal to anger to sadness to disbelief. I mean, you can imagine all those emotions, because as John said in the video, we thought we were just dealing with a rebellious teen. But now to find out what was really going on behind the scenes gave us a whole different picture. The silver lining in that, as devastating as that was at least now we knew what we were facing. Because before, we've just been kind of fighting this ghost. It's just, why is she doing this? And where's this attitude coming from? So at least now we knew who was behind it, and that there was an individual at the cause of all of that. John was on the East Coast on a business trip when we got that call, so it took about 24 hours for him to get home. When we sat down, we immediately began to talk it through, of course, and we realized we had 2 problems. First problem was stopping her from going right then, because we knew at that time we had been told we had 2 weeks. Turns out we had about 25 days. But we knew we had to stop her from going. Our second problem, which perhaps may have been the bigger problem, was stopping her from wanting to go. And that was a whole 2 completely different animals to tackle. So I want to go over with you what I call, for stopping her from going immediately, the tactical steps that we took as a parent. I'm going to be right in front of this for y'all. Is that better? Can y'all see that? Yeah. Okay, so the tactical steps, and I'll walk you through these real quickly. First of all, absolutely everything was done in secrecy from the moment we found out until the confrontation with the FBI. And that was largely because Mackenzie had already turned 18. We had very little legal authority to do anything. All 3 of her friends had told us that Mackenzie had said, if my parents find out, I will leave immediately. So we knew, we had to keep this secret. So all that we were doing, reaching out to people, everything that we plotted and schemed, was all done in secret. We prayed a whole bunch, as you can imagine. Just for wisdom, that she wouldn't slip through our net, that we would, as we would step, that something solid would land under our feet, because we were just flying by the seat of our pants. Safety first. That was kind of a mantra that John and I ended up developing, because we decided every decision we were going to make would first and foremost be for her safety. And if we, for whatever reason, had to make a decision or had to do something that would then blow our cover, we would clean up the mess later. But we were going to keep her safe. And we talked through all kinds of crazy stuff. What we would do to keep her here. You laugh. You remember those conversations, don't you?
Yes.
We put a GPS in her car so that we would know if her car started to the airport. That didn't cover us if she had a friend take her, but at least if her car headed to the airport, we knew. And both of us worked from home. We were constantly on that iPad checking that GPS to see where it was. She worked at a Sonic right down the street. I was constantly 11:30, 11:45 driving by there to make sure her car was still there, that we hadn't missed her somehow. We did take her passport and put it in the safe deposit box. Though once she realized that I had it and wasn't going to give it back to her, she illegally secured a second one, which turned out to be the best thing, and I'll get to that in a moment. And we had a 15-minute plan. Our 15-minute plan was, If we found out that she was leaving, say, tomorrow morning, within 15 minutes, we could sweep all the money out of her bank account. We could move her car, either disable it or hide it. We could disable her phone, change the Wi-Fi so she had no device in the house she would be able to connect to. And again, we would clean up the mess later if that's what we had to do. But it was a matter of her safety and keeping her in the house and in town. And then we began to coordinate with the FBI. We ended up working with Kevin Sheridan, who to this day is a personal friend, who I attribute largely to saving her life and helping us navigate all of this. So those were the tactical steps. Now, on to the relational steps that were to address the problem of her wanting to leave. Okay? Love her where she's at and don't burn the bridge. Let me talk to you through those. Love her where she's at. There was nothing about where she was at that I liked. Nothing where she was at that I approved of or that we thought was good for her. Absolutely nothing. But we did know that in order for her to even begin to maintain our relationship, she had to feel loved. And she had to feel loved unconditionally. And we would tell her that all the time, Mackenzie, we love you too much to just sit back and do nothing. And the message we kept trying to send to her was, we love you even if. I love you even when. And I love you even though. In fact, let's just be simple. I just love you because you're my daughter. It's just that simple. Because we don't want to give her any ammunition that she could say, well, my parents don't want me around because therefore I'm going to leave. Or my parents only want me if I don't give up my faith, or if I don't do this or do this. We can have no conditions. As I said, we didn't like where she was, but we loved her no matter what. I wanted her to know that. The second one, don't burn the bridge, was probably one of the hardest ones. Because as you can imagine, especially before we knew what was going on, the anger, the aggravation of dealing with what we thought was just a troubled, rebellious teen, well, the arguments got a little heated at times. You know, there's times that we wanted to say, just pack your stuff. You are causing so much chaos and so much havoc and so much trouble in our family. Just find another place. But we knew better than to say that. We said it to each other sometimes, but we knew better than to say that, because my prayer and my hope was someday she's going to wake up and realize what she's doing and where she's at. And when she turns around to head back home, I wanted nothing but a clear, open bridge all the way to her, with John and I standing on this side. And when she starts anything but home, and get home, we'll clean up the mess later, we'll deal with whatever we need to later, but I wanted her to have a clear shot home. It was hard to do, because your tempers flare, and it gets difficult sometimes not to just kind of lash out. With all of this going on, we had made contact with the FBI, and Kevin and his team came to my house. Now, how many of you have ever watched Criminal Minds or FBI? Come on, ladies, I know all y'all watch that. That's something, I don't know what it is about us. We like that kind of stuff. This one not unlike that. These 3 FBI agents showed up at my house in 3 separate cars. Not sure why they don't carpool, but showed up in 3 separate cars, 3 big black SUVs. And they stood in my foyer.
And Kevin's huge.
Kevin's huge. He's big. I mean, big.
Yeah.
Typical FBI. Stood in my foyer and planned this meeting with Mackenzie. To the details of, are we going to have our jackets on or off? Who's going to talk to her about her Miranda rights? Who's going to introduce everyone? Where is she going to sit? Where are mom and dad going to sit? Are we going to stand when she walks in the room? And they had this planned to the nth degree. And then they told me my job. Go to school and get Mackenzie and bring her home. This is the last, that she was taking her last final of her senior year. And they said, you have two instructions to do. First, you can tell her the FBI is at the house, but don't tell her why. And secondly, what I thought might be the harder one, don't let her use her phone. You ever try to take a phone from an 18-year-old? So I go to the school, and I park, and I start walking the parking lot, and I find her car. And I'm texting John the whole way, hey, I found her car, I'm standing there, because he's back home with the FBI. Okay, students are starting to come out of the school, I guess the period's over. Okay, I see Mackenzie, she's coming. Okay, she's getting closer. And then she walks up to me. Mom, what are you doing here? I said, well, honey, the FBI's at my house, and they want to talk to you. And of course she said, why? And I got to kind of turn it on her, because I used to hear this from her all the time. Oh, honey, you're 18. They want to talk to me. You're an adult. They want to talk to me. Here's your keys. I throw her car keys, because her car was a stick shift. So she had to drive home, couldn't use her phone. So it kind of saving grace from having that. So we get home. Now I can tell you that meeting lasted about 3 hours. And I probably could sit here and regurgitate verbatim, word for word. That means burned into my memory. But I do remember a couple of things I want to share. One, Kevin I can't tell you enough about Kevin. He went back and forth between the caring father, he had kids about her age, and talking to her like a father, and then talking to her like the big bad I'm saving America FBI agent, right? And he would just go back and forth, whatever he needed to do. The other agents chiming in as they needed to. And I had this hope as a mom, and I'm sure you would have the same, that once they began to confront her and talk to her about this, that she was going to have some explanation. It was all going to be wrong. And we were just all misinformed, you know? And there was going to be some reasonable explanation. But as they began to question her, and they would tell her things like, we know the answers to these questions, so be honest. And her tears began to fall, and she looked very, very small. It became very clear I wasn't going to get that hope. What we had been told was going to happen, what we thought was going to happen, was what she planned. And the one line that I remember from that meeting more than any, was Bob Mackenzie sitting here, was an agent sitting at the end of the table, and he leaned over, put his elbow on the table, and leaned in close to her. And he said, Mackenzie, you should not be doing this. We bring girls home like you in body bags every day. Now, as a mom, you can imagine how that feels. That your daughter, even though she was doing it innocently enough, she was putting herself in severe physical danger unknowingly. And it was kind of a gut punch, you know, to think what she was going to be walking into. Knowing in the back of my mind, we still hadn't stopped her wanting to go yet. After that meeting, Mackenzie did say, okay, maybe I shouldn't go there. But she didn't give up on the relationship. Y'all need to bring him here. You need to pay for him to come. You need to find a sponsor or sponsor him. Whatever you need to do. And we went through another couple of weeks of that. That was hard too. We weren't about to do it. It was hard to have those confrontations every day, because after this blew up, all I wanted to do was just hold her. And she wasn't quite ready for that yet. I think we stopped her from going, we hadn't stopped her wanting yet. And as a few weeks go by, there was some events that happened that made her somewhat vulnerable one morning. And Kevin happened to call John and said, I want to talk with her one more time. Bring her in, down to my office. And John said, I don't know if this is a really good day. He goes, no, this is a really good day. If she's vulnerable, this is a good day. So John and Mackenzie get in the car and they drive down there. It's out near DFW Airport. And they meet with Kevin. And he, again, goes vacillating through being the father and being the FBI agent. And he reviewed with her things that he had told her before, trying to impress upon her the danger of that part of the world and what she was walking into. And she just sat there quietly, kind of absorbing it. And then the last thing he said to her was, if you were to tell this guy, text him and say, I can't help you come to America. I can't pay for you, I can't find a sponsor, if you're gonna be with me, you gotta get here on your own. Then he will respond and he'll say, then come to Kosovo, we'll get married and go back to America as a couple. And then they left and they drove home, quiet ride home. And they get back to the house and they're in the study and Mackenzie quietly pulls out her phone and she texts him that, I can't help you come here. If you're gonna come, you gotta do it on your own. That quick, she gets the message back, verbatim, what Kevin had predicted. So finally, the first little brick in the wall falls. The first crack in the veneer where a little bit of light shines through. And she begins to have these thoughts of, maybe this isn't what I thought it was. Maybe the FBI knows what they're talking about. Maybe his behavior is more predictable than I thought it was. Maybe I'm the one being played here. So I want you to hear from Mackenzie after that happened.
No, I was just gonna get you to tell them about the passport, the second passport, how they used that.
Oh, yeah, so she had illegally obtained a second passport, which was the end that the FBI was able to technically come in and meet with her, because she lied on her application, and that is a felony. Now, in these types of instances, as long as she wasn't being, like, into one of these extreme groups or something like that, being radicalized, you know, they're not gonna prosecute a kid who did something like that, but she didn't know that. And so they use that as a really big stick, talking about Miranda rights and all that kind of stuff, really kind of scared her. But when that first brick fell and she was sitting in the study and realizing that maybe she was mistaken, she goes up to her room and she spends the afternoon. I want you to hear from Mackenzie how she spent that afternoon and what she did.
And later that night, I was sitting in my room, my head was just spinning, you know, and I was tired, you know, we had been through, 14 months of all this. And I kind of had what I equate, it was a moment of clarity, and I kind of describe it as, you know, if you watch a war movie, and after the battle's over, and you look around, and there's smoke, and destruction, and debris everywhere, I looked around, and that was my life, you know? I had no friends, I mean, I had pushed away my family. Everything was broken, didn't have my faith anymore. I was just a shell of who I used to be. I had no direction. And I thought, this isn't what love is, you know? Love shouldn't make me give up everything I knew and everything I loved, and it certainly shouldn't make me have to leave the country to go be with this person. And that night, I decided to break it off. And I decided, so when I was breaking this off, let me just kind of paint this picture for you. I had been spending 14 months hiding this relationship through all means possible, and just doing everything I possibly can to make sure that this relationship is safe, nobody knows about it, and you know, this is my person. And to hit, you know, block seems like such an easy thing to do. And I know you guys are thinking, why didn't you just do that earlier? I know. But it was hard, you know? Again, this addiction, I felt like I needed him. I felt like if I didn't have him, I had no direction. He was the only one who knew me. He was certainly the only one who understood me. And for me, I thought he was the only one I wanted. So hitting block, I was just, crying, and I felt like a robot. Hitting this block button represented so much for me. And I finally did it, and I decided I wanted my life back.
That was a wonderful night in my home. She actually came bounding downstairs the next day. Just the weight of the world was off her shoulders from all the lying and the deceit and hiding that she had been through. I want to take just a moment to talk about the three friends and how much we do owe them. We honored their request to not tell Mackenzie who they were initially. Now, it was 7 steps from those friends going to their parents until we finally got down the road to Kevin Sheridan. At any of those steps, at any point, that person said, "Not my business. I'm not gonna get involved." We wouldn't have been able to get to Kevin. And I don't believe we would have been able to save them. So I tell kids all the time, you're not betraying the trust if you go get help for your friends. So I want to talk to you as parents. If your student or your niece or your neighbor or your grandchild, whoever it may be, comes to you and they've got a friend that's in trouble, it can be this. It can be a real physical relationship that's abusive or manipulative. How many kids today deal with suicide or suicidal thoughts and depression, eating disorders? I mean, it can be anything like that. Please, please make a call. You can even do it anonymous. You can call the school counselor and say, I need to be anonymous, but I need you to get this message to Miss Smith. This is what my student tells me that her son or daughter is doing. Give that parent a chance to either save their own kid or change the trajectory of their life. If we hadn't had 7 people do that, and by the way, there were more than 7 that knew. There were some other adults that knew. But those 7 kept that chain going. The other thing is, many of those 7 didn't have the solution. They didn't call me and say, okay, this is what's going on now, you need to do this, 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 and this, and it'll all be fixed. Matter of fact, the 3 parents that called, they said, I don't know what to tell you to do. I just know you need to know this. And then from that point on, it was try this number, try this person, let me call this person for you, hopefully you'll hear back from this person, until we finally got together. I'm going to leave you with some things to remember. Please use parental control or monitoring software. Just don't have that be all of it. Okay, there's more to it than that. You can't put that control on there and think that's got it covered. But please use it because they're good. And now if you just Google, the top parental control software, you get the top 10 and they're all good. Okay? Educate our students because remember, grooming feels good. They need to know that. I don't think they know that. They think it's creepy and weird and it's not. Grooming makes them feel like women when they're 13. It makes them feel like they have a friend if they're socially awkward. It makes them feel like they're mature when they're really just being their age. Also, educate our students about the tactics that they use. We've gone through 2 of them just briefly tonight. I think you can kind of see the trend of how they work. There's lots more out there. There's others in the book even. But the tactics, if they know about them, they can see them. If they don't know them, they fall for them. Make that call, even if you don't have the answer. Give that other parent a chance. I owe 7 people a huge thank you for helping me save Mackenzie. Technology is here to stay. We can't take it away. Like I said before, even if you were to not give your students any device. Quick note, when Mackenzie made contact with Adam, she was not at my house. She was not on her equipment. So even if she hadn't had it, she would have made contact. She was at a friend's house on their computer. In the book, there's a lot more about tactics and things that I think would be helpful. The last chapter I want to specifically mention was written by a local counselor. It specifically talks about relationship addiction and social media addiction. I wish every student could read that chapter to just see if they see some of their own personality traits in there, so that maybe before it gets too deep and embedded, they might take just a step back and look at themselves a little bit more objectively. It's also got a lot in there for parents. When you see your student doing this or that, maybe good ways to respond, good things to say, to begin to head some of that off. It's an excellent chapter. I want to close before we do some Q&A with another quote from Alicia, the 13-year-old girl. She's all grown up now. She does her own speaking. And this is a quote that she says, whenever she is out and about and sees a group of teenagers maybe hanging outside a movie theater or the mall or wherever, she says, I watch them take their pictures and do all kinds of stuff with their phones. If they only knew how dangerous that device could be. And that's what we need our kids to know. It's a wonderful device. there's risks. This is our contact information. I monitor that email account all the time. If you need an ear, you need somebody to talk to, email me. We'll exchange phone numbers and we'll meet for coffee and we'll talk through. I don't have magic dust. I don't have a silver bullet, but I'll help you any way that I can. Okay? Thank you for having me here. I really enjoyed talking with you. If we've got time for Q&A, I know we got a late start. That's up to you.
What time is it?
I
don't have.
8:15.
Be back an hour. We have about 15 minutes. No, we're supposed to be out by 8:30.
Okay, that's up. Do you mind if we do some Q&A?
No,
Okay.
Where's your first one?
Yes.
So, two parts. Number one, in the news item, it mentioned she had converted to Islam.